Olá, bom dia a todos. Bem-vindos a mais uma mesa do evento Atos em Construção, um encontro em comemoração aos 90 anos de Augusto Boal, promovido pelo Departamento de Letras Modernas da Universidade de São Paulo, mais especificamente pelo Programa de Estudos Linguísticos e Literários em Inglês da Universidade de São Paulo, em parceria com o Grupo de Estudos em Teatro Político, o corajoso GTPOL, também da USP. Essa mesa dialoga muito com o que a gente estava conversando ontem à noite. Dialoga muito com as características transnacionais do teatro do Augusto Boal, portanto, com seu exílio e com a sistematização do teatro do oprimido. Ontem, quando conversamos sobre essas características transnacionais da prática de Augusto Boal, e quando a gente conversou também sobre as maneiras pelas quais o teatro do oprimido está embebido, né, faz parte de um compromisso pela mudança social, percebemos que essa orientação não começou propriamente no tempo de sistematização do TO. Esse compromisso pela mudança social não começa com a sistematização, né? Começa antes, começa muito tempo antes, né? Talvez na década de 50, durante os estudos na Universidade de Colômbia, durante a sua participação simultânea à Colômbia no grupo amador chamado The Writers Group, no Atos Studio, no próprio Teatro de Arena, em que ele entra no final da década de 50 e permanece por longos anos, e assim por diante. Então, como que a gente pode definir o teatro do oprimido, se não como um método de trabalho criado em tempos de guerra, em tempos de intensa repressão ditatorial? Não é só um método formal, como a gente debateu ontem, mas é um método de trabalho no sentido marxista, de produção de sentido no mundo. Um modo de relacionar teatro, política e um sentido ético urgente no mundo em que a lógica hegemônica mina o próprio sentido do que é ser humano. Eu estou muito feliz em receber hoje com a gente 4 convidados muito especiais, cujos trabalhos utilizando o TO são tão corajosos e, de certa forma, levando em conta o trabalho da Kelly, do Pink e da Chetna, transnacionais. Talvez no GTPOL, agora com o Hayaldo. Eles são parte de uma rede importante que cria espaços de resistência através das artes e do diálogo e da pedagogia. Por isso que eles estão aqui conosco para compartilhar os seus conhecimentos e nos ajudar a resistir. Muito obrigada, Kelly Howe, Pink Flowers, dos Estados Unidos, Chetna Mehrotra, da Índia, e Hayaldo Copque, nosso colega, nosso companheiro de GTPOL brasileiro. Essa mesa vai ser bilíngue, portanto, eu vou traduzir esse comecinho para o inglês, para os nossos convidados entenderem. Eu peço para que todos que tenham dúvidas em relação às comunicações, perguntas, coloquem no chat. Se vocês tiverem dúvidas e quiserem elaborar as perguntas em português, a gente tenta traduzir e passar para os nossos convidados. Tudo bem? Yesterday, we talked about the transnational characteristics of Augusto Boal's practice, the ways in which theater of the oppressed is embedded in the commitment for social change, and how this orientation did not begin at the time TO was systematized. It began much earlier, in the 50s, during his studies at Columbia University, his participation in the Writers Group, in the Actors Studio, in the Arena Theater, and so on. So, how can we define TO if not a work method created in times of war, in times of intense repression, and in times of dictatorship? It is not only a formal method, but a work method, a way to relate theater, politics, and an urgent ethical sense in a world where the hegemonic logic undermines the very sense of what it means to be human. I am very happy to welcome 4 guests whose work using TO is so brave and transnational. They are part of an important network that creates spaces of resistance through the arts and the dialogue. And that is why they are here with us today to share and help us resist. Thank you so much, Kelly Howe, Pink Flowers from the US, Chetna from India, and Hayaldo Copque from Brazil. Thank you so much. Good morning, Kelly and Pink. Good evening, Chetna. E bom dia, Hayaldo. A gente começa essa mesa com a comunicação do Hayaldo, que é dramaturgo, diretor teatral e professor adjunto da área de teatro da Universidade Estadual do Sudoeste da Bahia, UESB, no Departamento de Ciências Humanas e Letras, onde ministra aulas de dramaturgia, estética do oprimido e montagens didáticas. Com pesquisas na área de dramaturgia, aborda atualmente temas relacionados à inserção do real e à busca pelo engajamento social em dramaturgias políticas. Possui mestrado e doutorado em artes cênicas pelo Programa de Pós-Graduação em Artes Cênicas da Universidade Federal da Bahia e bacharelado em artes cênicas com habilitação em interpretação teatral também pela UFBA, onde ainda atuou como professor de 2012 a 2014. Foi vice-presidente regional e atualmente é diretor de comunicação da Associação dos Docentes da UESB e é membro do GTPOL USP. Eu tenho muita honra de ser sua colega, Hayaldo. A palavra está contigo.
A honra é minha, a honra é toda minha. Inclusive de estar nesse evento, né, que tem sido um evento de muito aprendizado. Patrícia, você é excelente na apresentação, é um negócio assim que eu fico aqui tomando nota de como ser. Bom, a Patrícia me apresentou e eu sou professor da UESB desde 2016, né? A Universidade Estadual do Sudoeste da Bahia, onde tem um curso de licenciatura em teatro. E eu começo a fazer teatro oprimido, a trabalhar com teatro oprimido, a partir da UESB. Começo a trabalhar com teatro oprimido a partir do concurso que já constava com essa disciplina. Então, minha experiência é um pouco mais curta e eu gostaria de, na verdade, quando a Patrícia me fez o convite, né, eu pensei logo em falar um pouco sobre uma questão que eu tenho me debruçado ultimamente, que é a questão do teatro oprimido nas universidades brasileiras, né? E as implicações disso. Então, eu vou fazer um texto aqui, eu fiz um texto aqui, na verdade, e eu vou falar um pouco, primeiro, sobre a questão do TO nas universidades brasileiras, e depois eu vou abordar um pouquinho da minha experiência, apontando um pouco dos riscos do teatro oprimido nas universidades, porque, sim, existem. Então é isso. Então agradecer pelo convite para estar aqui nessa mesa, mas agradecer muito mais por poder fazer parte do GTPOL, né? Não há nada bom nessa pandemia, tem gente morrendo, né? A gente tem variantes aí chegando. No Brasil a gente tem o Bolsonaro e suas variantes também, né? Sérgio Moro, João Dória, mas ao mesmo tempo o GTPOL conseguiu surgir no meio dessa... É a flor que nasce no asfalto, né? Enfim, mas vamos lá. Eu vou começar lendo, tá? Eu sou dramaturgo, como a Patrícia falou, então eu me sinto um pouco melhor com a palavra escrita e em alguns momentos eu vou saindo, vou tentar não ser tão mecânico na minha leitura. Bom, abordar a presença do teatro do oprimido e mesmo de Augusto Boal nas universidades brasileiras, é também abordar o porquê do longo período de ausência do teatro oprimido e de Augusto Boal nas universidades brasileiras. E aponto aqui especialmente os muitos cursos de teatro ou artes cênicas espalhados pelo país, onde tal presença seria, de certo modo, mais natural. Afinal, estamos falando daquele que é possivelmente o homem de teatro mais conhecido em países estrangeiros, né? O homem de teatro brasileiro mais conhecido em países estrangeiros. E falando também de sua contribuição mais difundida, dentre suas tantas contribuições ao teatro, que é o teatro oprimido, né? A gente viu aqui ao longo desse evento, e quem estuda o Boal sabe disso, né? Todo o trabalho no Teatro de Arena, todas as contribuições dele, Feira Paulista de Opinião, né? E o teatro oprimido é parte dessa história, mas é também a parte mais difundida, né? Globalmente, inclusive. E é curioso como, no Brasil, durante muito tempo, houve um verdadeiro silêncio em relação ao teatro oprimido nas nossas universidades. Então, eu vou começar falando dessa ausência em específico do teatro do oprimido, né? Em um livro intitulado Teatro do Oprimido e Universidade, Experimentos, Ensaios e Investigações, o professor Zeca Ligiero, ele vai contar que, eu vou citar o professor Zeca, tá? No final da década de 1980, as ideias de Boal já estavam definitivamente inseridas no meio universitário norte-americano, estadunidense, né? Ele quer dizer. O mesmo ocorria na França e na Inglaterra, como pude verificar muitos anos depois. Ou seja, na década de 80, o Zeca já localizava o teatro oprimido como sendo algo inserido no meio universitário estadunidense, na França, na Inglaterra. Curiosamente, o mesmo nesse período não acontecia por aqui. A coisa certamente era diferente na década de 1980 no Brasil. Vejamos o que Ligiero nos diz a seguir, agora a respeito da Escola de Teatro da Universidade Federal do Estado do Rio de Janeiro, a Unirio, no ano de 2000. Olha, ele está falando dos anos 80, agora ele está falando dos anos 2000 e do Brasil. Fala o professor Zeca. A escola de teatro, tradicionalmente voltada para o ensino do teatro ortodoxo, até aquela época não conhecia o teatro do oprimido, anos 2000. Embora tivesse em seu quadro de professores nomes como de José Renato, um dos fundadores do Teatro de Arena e de alguns estudiosos do chamado moderno teatro brasileiro, que ainda era visto, o teatro do oprimido, como algo de menor relevância dentro da carreira do eminente dramaturgo e diretor, Augusto Boal, ou como um conjunto de experiências cênicas, de certo modo, contaminadas pelo seu excessivo engajamento político. Ou seja, o Ligiero ele aponta um certo preconceito, inclusive, em relação ao teatro oprimido e, ao mesmo tempo, a ausência completa, né, o desconhecimento sobre o teatro oprimido no ano 2000 na Unirio. Enfim. E aí é curioso porque sempre nos eventos sobre teatro oprimido surge essa questão, né? Surge alguém que diz assim, nossa, eu nunca ouvi falar sobre isso. Gente que é formada em teatro. Eu me graduei em 2000 e... Fala do meu caso particular, porque eu acho que é importante. Eu me graduei em 2010, 2009, né? E passei toda a minha faculdade sem ouvir falar do Boal, né? Teatro de Arena, nada, na UFBA, né? Teatro oprimido muito menos. Acredito que hoje as coisas tenham mudado por lá, mas isso não é exclusivo da UFBA ou da Unirio, infelizmente, né? Bom, não é meu objetivo aqui discutir os motivos dessa ausência do teatro oprimido nas universidades, mas é importante questioná-la. Afinal, estaríamos diante de um desconhecimento, um descuido, ou de um negligenciar programático? Há algumas hipóteses, muitos palpites, mas certamente fatores diversos cooperaram para isso. Ao fato de o teatro oprimido ter se desenvolvido em grande parte enquanto Boal esteve fora do país, exilado, podemos somar, por exemplo, o pensamento em grande parte colonizado, antipopular e pequeno burguês dos corpos docentes de nossas universidades. Ainda bem que eu já estou concursado, porque senão eu não ia ser mais aprovado em nenhum concurso, né? Depois dessa. Aliás, além certamente de outros aspectos que podem se somar a isso. Há um lapso temporal, é verdade. No entanto, nos últimos anos, é cada vez maior e mais forte o movimento para a inserção do teatro oprimido nas universidades brasileiras. Movimento que vem efetivamente alterando esse cenário de apagamento e que se deve, como não poderia deixar de ser, a um trabalho coletivo. Muitas e muitos são as professoras, professores, pesquisadoras, pesquisadores de norte a sul do Brasil a espalhar a semente do teatro oprimido na academia. Peguei a imagem aí do teatro oprimido, da semente, né? Alguns começaram mais cedo, como é o caso da professora Silvia Balestreri Nunes, atualmente na Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. Silvia Balestreri defende sua dissertação de mestrado em psicologia social, pela PUC do Rio, intitulada Teatro do Oprimido, Revolução ou Rebeldia, em 1991. E ainda durante os anos 1990, passa a ministrar disciplinas sobre o TO na Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. A professora Silvia Balestreri nos contou isso durante a última GITOU, né, na organização do observatório, e ela fala também que, segundo um livro do Antônio Altieri, segundo Altieri, essa dissertação dela, ela é a primeira dissertação sobre o teatro oprimido no país, isso em 1991. Há ainda o caso da professora Antônia Pereira Bezerra, que defende sua tese sobre o TO em 1999. Só que a professora Antônia, ela vai defender isso na França, né? Apesar de estar presente em eventos acadêmicos e tudo mais aqui no Brasil nesse período. Bom, no entanto, é só a partir dos anos 2000 que o TO passa a ser inserido de modo mais manifesto nas universidades brasileiras. Ainda que aparentemente com movimentos mais individuais e conectados essencialmente ao âmbito das pós-graduações. Na década seguinte, 2010, aí a gente identifica um importante marco nessa breve história do TO nas universidades brasileiras que eu estou tentando traçar aqui, né? Que é o surgimento do Gesto, o grupo que é inicialmente intitulado Grupo de Especialização em Teatro Oprimido, né? E vinculado ao Núcleo de Estudos das Performances Afro-Ameríndias, o NEPA, da Unirio, e atualmente é o Grupo de Estudos, a especialização entre estudos em teatro oprimido, vinculado à Universidade Federal da Bahia, UFBA, liderado lá na plataforma do Diretório de Grupos, né? Pela professora Antônia Pereira Bezerra, hoje. Esse grupo é formado, a princípio, por coringas pesquisadores que trabalharam diretamente com Augusto Boal no Centro de Teatro Oprimido, CTO. Da formação inicial, a gente tem o Cachalote Matos, o Flávio Sancto, a Ellen Sarapec, nossa colega aqui de GTPOL, Jussara Trindade e o Lico Turli. Hoje esse grupo tem outros nomes também presentes. O grupo passa a desenvolver ações de ensino, pesquisa e extensão, né, o tal tripé universitário, e a promover o teatro oprimido dentro e fora do ambiente universitário, incluindo a realização das Jornadas Internacionais de Teatro Oprimido e Universidade, a GITOU, que anualmente reúnem brasileiros e estrangeiros, praticantes e interessados no teatro oprimido. Se eu estiver indo muito rápido, né, vocês me avisam aí, tá bom? Atualmente, nota-se uma maior presença, fez esse panorama, né, 2010, e agora a gente já está chegando nos anos 2020. Atualmente, nota-se uma maior presença do teatro oprimido nas universidades brasileiras, no ensino, na pesquisa e na extensão, de norte a sul do país, e em diversos cursos, ainda que, muito possivelmente, sua maior presença seja realmente nos cursos de licenciatura em artes cênicas ou teatro, né? Especificamente na licenciatura, mais do que no bacharelado mesmo. Se eu for citar nomes agora, pode ficar feio para mim, né? Mas a gente fez um pequeno levantamento durante a GITOU, né? A última, a nona GITOU, e de fato a gente verifica que o teatro oprimido está muito inserido em algumas universidades brasileiras, realmente de norte a sul do país. Tem a Silvia Balestreri lá no sul, tem mais gente, inclusive, no sul do país. Tem um forte movimento também no norte do país, um grupo intitulado Norte das Resistências, né? E que busca, inclusive, trazer o teatro oprimido ainda mais para as universidades lá, né? Tem a Anne Martins, o Flávio da Conceição e outros nomes. Tem a UNB, a gente já teve aqui o Rafael Vilas Boas, né? E a UNB tem um movimento bastante interessante também. E a Bahia, especificamente da Bahia, é interessante falar, porque na Bahia hoje nós temos pelo menos 4 professores que, pelo menos, né, 4 professores em 4 universidades diferentes que trabalham com teatro oprimido, mas voltado para a relação com as licenciaturas em artes ou em teatro. Na UFSB tem o Fernando, o Leão, o Lico, junto com a Antônia, na UFBA, a Taína Assis, na UNEB, e eu aqui na UESB. Então, a Bahia é um excelente exemplo, né, nesse sentido. E na UESB tem uma questão que é interessante, que é o fato de que, desde 2010, a disciplina Estética do Oprimido, que é uma disciplina basicamente sobre o teatro do oprimido, ela compõe o currículo como disciplina obrigatória. É interessante porque, muitas vezes, o teatro do oprimido, ele, quando entra no ensino, ele entra como uma disciplina optativa, eletiva, né? Optativa. Mas na UESB, desde 2010, que o teatro oprimido está como uma disciplina obrigatória do curso de licenciatura em teatro. Inclusive, o Lico Turli costuma falar que eu sou talvez o primeiro professor a passar num concurso para dar aula de teatro oprimido. A disciplina foi organizada pelo corpo docente antes da minha entrada na universidade, e quando eu fiz o concurso para dramaturgia e estética do oprimido. Hoje, inclusive, o meu esforço na UESB é para que essa disciplina faça parte também de outros cursos na universidade. Inclusive, em breve, ela deve entrar aí como disciplina optativa no curso de Pedagogia. Eu vou discutir um pouco mais sobre essa questão da institucionalização mais na frente. Ainda nessa questão do histórico, na nona GETOU, a última edição ocorrida em outubro desse ano, a gente organizou, eu junto com o Gesto e com outros pesquisadores do país, a gente começou a gente deu o pontapé inicial na concepção de um observatório do TO nas universidades, né? A ideia é criar um espaço de compartilhamento de trabalhos de pesquisa, extensão, emendas de cursos, planos de cursos, experiências diversas no âmbito da universidade que envolvam o teatro oprimido, com o objetivo de aproximar e fortalecer uma rede de docentes, discentes, de mais praticantes do TO, interessados em trocar conhecimentos e experiências, né? Com o objetivo também de estreitar as conexões, ampliar o espaço de comunicação entre os diferentes praticantes do TO nas universidades brasileiras, oferecer subsídios, né, para o fortalecimento do TO no âmbito acadêmico. Em resumo, o que se espera é que seja um trabalho conjunto com a participação de professores, pesquisadores e demais praticantes do TO, de todas as regiões do país, que realizará um mapeamento das práticas do teatro oprimido nas universidades brasileiras, disciplinas, cursos, né, grupos de estudo, TCCs, dissertações, teses. Assim, se o projeto vai caminhar ou não, aí é algo que a gente está trabalhando para que ele saia do papel, né? Na verdade, para que ele entre no papel e saia, ganhe um mundo. Porque é uma forma importante de termos também esse breve histórico aqui e de estreitarmos, né, as conexões, ampliarmos também a rede dos fazedores de TO nas universidades. Bom, feito esse histórico, eu agora parto para alguns questionamentos. Por que essa necessidade de difundir e fortalecer a presença do TO no ambiente acadêmico? E quais as implicações da presença do TO nas universidades? Eu vou tentar responder essas questões refletindo a partir da minha experiência como professor de teatro oprimido em uma universidade e das questões levantadas em tantos encontros, incluindo os eventos acadêmicos como a GETOU e até mesmo o nosso evento aqui, onde algumas provocações foram feitas em relação ao teatro oprimido, né, desde o primeiro dia. Então, eu vou começar pela primeira questão, que é por que essa necessidade de difundir e fortalecer a presença do TO no ambiente acadêmico? Bom, pensando mais especificamente no campo da formação em artes cênicas ou teatro, a longa ausência do teatro oprimido no âmbito universitário brasileiro, assim como a flagrante resistência acadêmica, o estudo mais aprofundado sobre os teatros de agite-prop, os teatros negros e outras tantas práticas que atuam na contramão do teatro burguês ou de um certo mainstream cultural, essa ausência é também um diagnóstico a respeito do quão colonizado e antipopular, eu já falei isso, são ou eram nossas universidades. Arrisco-me a dizer que é também um diagnóstico de um país que, em determinados setores, parece ter aceitado com comodidade, incorporado a lógica conciliatória de uma lei da anistia, por exemplo, ao ponto do apagamento em nossa história de importantes capítulos de luta e resistência do campo cultural. Nesse sentido, a importância de se estudar o Teatro de Arena, o CPC, os Centros Populares de Cultura, Feira Paulista de Opinião e o Teatro Oprimido, só para ficarmos em exemplos associados ao Boal, está conectada à preservação da nossa memória de luta, uma memória de potencial ativador, já que, a partir da perspectiva crítica que essas práticas inserem no Teatro Nacional, aponta-se também, ainda hoje, caminhos para a ação. Os tempos são outros, é verdade. De um lado, as universidades brasileiras se defrontam e se confrontam com a exigência cada vez mais presente por temas e práticas que apontem na direção decolonial, para que possam, inclusive, melhor atender às transformações que essas mesmas universidades sofreram e têm sofrido nos últimos anos em função da expansão do acesso ao ensino superior no Brasil. Não se trata apenas da abertura de novas universidades e do processo de interiorização, por exemplo, mas também da entrada de outros rostos e identidades sociais, especialmente através da política de cotas. Em espaços tão acostumados a ver circular, em sua grande maioria, pessoas brancas e advindas de escolas privadas. Por outro lado, e nisso nos aproximamos um pouco do contexto brasileiro das décadas de 1960 e 1970, em tempos ainda mais recentes, vemos o ressurgimento de uma direita até então envergonhada e de um movimento não conservador, mas reacionário, que busca reverter os avanços sociais, ainda que para alguns poucos, né, experimentados nas últimas décadas, com o objetivo de nos lançar de vez às trevas de um neofascismo. O estudo e a prática do teatro oprimido nas universidades traz a possibilidade de atender, em certa medida, as demandas por diálogo com as questões sociais de nosso tempo, em uma perspectiva de alargamento do pensamento crítico. No campo da educação como um todo, o TOE pode ser, ou deve ser, um aliado de práticas pedagógicas libertadoras, no sentido freiriano. E aí, como eu estou falando da relação, vou falar brevemente aqui da relação do Freire e do Boal, a partir de um artigo da Tânia Baraúna, né? Professora e pesquisadora Tânia Baraúna. Segundo Baraúna, aspas, Freire e Boal propõem uma educação e um teatro popular que promovam a autonomia numa sociedade multicultural, através de ações que estimulem a aprendizagem e a participação social do sujeito, propiciando ao indivíduo traçar seus próprios caminhos em interação com o meio social, através da construção do próprio conhecimento estabelecida nas relações com as experiências vividas dentro do seu contexto social. Sendo função da educação preparar o indivíduo para o exercício da cidadania e para a concretização da democracia fundamentada em princípios éticos. Depois a gente pode até retomar a discussão, né, que uma das mesas até apontou sobre a questão do cidadão, né, que, enfim, colocado também na obra do Boal em um determinado momento, em lugar até de oprimido. E também do foco na questão do indivíduo aqui no texto da Baraúna. Tá? Mas vamos avançar, porque eu acho que o que ela aponta é mais interessante aqui no geral. Nesse mesmo artigo, a Tânia Baraúna também afirma que as metodologias de Freire e Boal, também fala dela, podem ser percebidas e compreendidas como um sistema de vasos comunicantes, cujos principais pontos de sustentação são as questões éticas, morais, sociais e estéticas, em relações construídas através do diálogo, de forma que se supõe uma troca, posto que as pessoas se educam em comunhão, mediatizadas pelo mundo. É interessante porque eu estava lendo esses dias o Paulo Freire, inclusive, Pedagogia da Tolerância, ele fala que a libertação não pode ser doada, presenteada em uma festa de aniversário. A libertação é algo que nós criamos, fazemos em comunhão. Isso aqui é puro Boal também, né? Enfim. Baraúna também aponta a transdisciplinaridade e transversalidade como elementos comuns às práticas de Freire e Boal. Tanto assim que, dentro das universidades, o teatro do oprimido passa a ser uma importante ferramenta metodológica e pedagógica nos mais diversos cursos, do teatro e da pedagogia ao direito, à saúde coletiva, a psicologia e até mesmo a arquitetura e urbanismo. Isso foi um choque que eu tive na Agitou, que teve uma estudante, né, de mestrado que estava apresentando um projeto que era um desenvolvimento de um trabalho que ela estava fazendo que relacionava a arquitetura com o teatro oprimido. E se a gente lembra da árvore do teatro oprimido, é uma imagem que eu acho que é muito importante da gente sempre lembrar a árvore do teatro oprimido, né? Porque é uma imagem que ela sintetiza também uma ideia. E se a gente lembrar da árvore do teatro oprimido, lá no solo da árvore a gente tem a história, a gente tem a filosofia, a gente tem a política, então ele já nasce interdisciplinar, mas também ele atravessa, né, como bem aponta Tânia Baraúna, as disciplinas todas. Bom, ainda que ressalvas possam e devam ser feitas, e que algumas práticas talvez desviem dos objetivos do teatro oprimido, nele está contido, quando devidamente praticado, né, e a gente pode até questionar o que seria esse devidamente praticado, o horizonte emancipatório e a perspectiva de um olhar crítico sobre a realidade social, que parecem ser elementos fundamentais, inclusive para provocar a academia a uma reflexão sobre seu papel. O teatro oprimido também provoca a mesma academia a extrapolar os muros das universidades, construindo pontes entre as universidades e os mais diversos ambientes sociais. Movimentos sociais, escolas, centros de saúde, prisões, manifestações de rua, né? ONGs, dentre outros, são importantes espaços para a aplicação do teatro oprimido e que possibilitam à universidade, e a universidade é uma abstração, né? Mas as pessoas que a compõem, o aprofundamento e deslocamento de seus pontos de vista. Ao mesmo tempo em que, muitas vezes, o suporte acadêmico, e fala aqui de suporte financeiro, das estruturas físicas da universidade, do material humano, esse suporte acadêmico também auxiliam tais movimentos na realização de algumas de suas atividades. Obviamente que eu falo agora da extrapolação do teatro oprimido, tão necessária para a articulação dos objetivos sociais nele presentes. Então, a gente percebe que as ações mais lembradas assim do teatro oprimido nas universidades, nos projetos de pesquisa, nas comunicações acadêmicas e tudo mais, elas se dão muito conectadas ao âmbito da extensão universitária. E de fato, romper esses muros, eu acho que é a função de todo mundo que trabalha com o teatro oprimido das universidades brasileiras. Outro elemento que não pode ser esquecido ao abordarmos a importância do teatro nas universidades é o trabalho estético que ele propõe. Não apenas pelo fato de o teatro oprimido explicitar a conexão da estética com a política, assumindo seu lugar de instrumento de luta em ambos os campos, mas especialmente pela busca de libertação também frente à estética dominante das mídias de massa, por exemplo. Toda cultura dialética se move, afirma Boal em A Estética do Oprimido. Boal e outras vozes aí falando junto com ele, né? A Estética do Oprimido é um livro que parece ser um tanto menosprezado por alguns estudiosos, que centram muitas vezes suas críticas na mudança de termos ou no foco estético, sem perceber que há um aprimoramento do olhar forma-conteúdo para além do material textual. E aí eu falo do sentido dialético também. Acredito, inclusive, que, caso houvesse maior disposição desses mesmos críticos em relação a essa obra, possivelmente poderiam contribuir ainda mais com o avançar de um teatro político mais socialmente mobilizador. Em A Estética do Oprimido, a partir do trabalho coletivo realizado no CTO, com o CTO, a partir de uma prática reflexiva e dialógica, Boal nos apresenta um olhar mais aprofundado sobre a necessidade de apropriação das questões estéticas por parte dos fazedores de teatro oprimido, a fim de que o processo de emancipação se dê de modo mais amplo. Se a gente puder, se é que a gente pode falar de emancipação com graus variados, né? Isso fica muito claro, a importância do trabalho estético, especialmente na formação, nas licenciaturas em teatro, né? O quanto isso possibilita, inclusive, a ampliação da discussão política, do olhar crítico. A equipe do CTO, que assina um texto introdutório do livro A Estética do Oprimido, afirma que, aspas de novo, o processo que gerou a Estética do Oprimido surgiu da análise crítica dos projetos do CTO, onde se identificava a necessidade concreta de desenvolver um senso estético próprio nos integrantes dos grupos comunitários. Seguindo a orientação de Boal, buscamos encontrar os meios para auxiliar os integrantes desses grupos a se libertarem das amarras estéticas a que estavam submetidos e a criarem a sua própria estética, na qual pudessem se reconhecer e com a qual pudessem se expressar. Claro que não se pode ficar só no esteticismo, né? Isso talvez seja uma crítica a alguns desenvolvimentos disso. Numa busca por formas que passam a ser pensadas de forma distanciada do que deveriam ser os seus conteúdos. Começamos, então, a tratar agora, a partir dessa minha pequena fala, dos riscos do TO nas universidades. Pois se o teatro oprimido tem potencial, eu estou falando em potencial, para mudar nossas universidades, o contrário também se dá. Se o TO muda as universidades, ele também pode mudar junto. Eu tenho muito tempo ainda, Patrícia, como é que eu estou?
5 minutos, Hayaldo.
Ok, vamos lá.
Está tranquilo, né?
Tá tranquilo. Eu vou abordar um pouco dos riscos do TO. Eu acho que a propaganda positiva é mais interessante também nesse momento que a gente está vivendo, mas é importante também levantar os riscos. Como eu falei, eu passei em um concurso para ministrar a disciplina de teatro oprimido. Isso por si só já eu vou sintetizar aqui as ideias. Então. Isso por si só já pode ser problemático. Eu não vinha de uma formação com teatro oprimido, olha só. A minha formação era em dramaturgia, então eu passei no concurso muito por conta da dramaturgia também. Apesar de que, assim que entrei na universidade, eu me envolvi com teatro oprimido, primeiro obrigatoriamente, depois também pelo engajamento próprio, né, que vai sendo mobilizado. Mas é importante apontar para a formação dos professores, já que a gente está falando do teatro oprimido nas universidades. Além da formação técnica, em relação às técnicas do teatro oprimido, é necessário que haja também um compromisso com a educação. É necessário também que esse professor, de certo modo, ele esteja antenado, né, com os acontecimentos do mundo, já que o trabalho com o teatro oprimido, ele propõe um olhar em busca da transformação social. Então, quando o Julian Boal fala aqui que o professor não pode ser só professor, no trabalho com o teatro oprimido, isso, de certo modo, eu concordo com ele. É preciso também sair das amarras de sua posição institucional, né? É bom lembrar sempre da base da árvore, tá, gente? Então, a institucionalização do teatro oprimido não deixa de ser uma crise chinesa, né, do teatro oprimido, que aponta, tem as possibilidades, mas tem também vários problemas. O TO se tornar mercadoria, por exemplo, é um dos grandes problemas, né? A ampliação disso. A gente tem, por exemplo, limitações temporais nas disciplinas. Estou falando do ensino, TO como disciplina. E o teatro oprimido, entende-se que ele precisa de um trabalho mais prolongado no tempo, né? E associado a outras questões. Muitas vezes as turmas, aí falando muito da minha perspectiva, tem pessoas diversas. Imagina um professor de teatro oprimido se deparando com a turma de pessoas que não necessariamente compartilham de uma visão, vou dizer até progressista do mundo, né? O perigo da tautologia, por exemplo, o teatro oprimido pelo teatro oprimido, como um mero ensino de técnicas. Tudo está associado a essa noção do teatro oprimido como algo a ser apenas vendido na universidade, né? Há também o perigo de se perder em discussões menores, né? Já que a gente está trabalhando muitas vezes, quando a gente está trabalhando no ensino, com grupos socialmente não organizados e tudo mais. E aí é sempre importante a gente lembrar que a árvore do teatro oprimido, ela aponta para as ações diretas, não só para a multiplicação, que é importante. Então, é importante ter teatro oprimido nas universidades, mas a árvore do teatro oprimido, ela aponta para as ações diretas. Então, todo o trabalho com teatro oprimido, ele precisa ser nesse sentido. Se o ensino não dá conta, então é hora desse professor buscar a pesquisa, buscar a extensão. Para concluir, tá, Patrícia? como eu falei, desde 2016 eu entrei na UESB, né? E meu processo de formação com o Teatro Oprimido é contínuo. E, por conta disso, eu notei a importância do laboratório. Eu acho que esse é um caminho importante quando a gente fala do teatro do oprimido nas universidades, né? Um laboratório onde a gente possa fazer um trabalho continuado, onde a gente possa pensar as ações do teatro do oprimido e agir também na extensão, com outros grupos sociais e tudo mais, mas onde a gente possa também aprimorar, né, essa relação do teatro do oprimido com a mobilização social. Porque o TO, ele é uma ferramenta e ele deve compor um currículo crítico, mas que também, em alguns momentos, o TO talvez possa ser deixado de lado quando não corresponder mais às demandas sociais, ou ele possa ser modificado. O TO não pode ser, e esse é o risco, é um grande risco quando o TO entra nas universidades, enquanto disciplina, por exemplo, ele não pode ser tomado como um manual de instruções, né? As técnicas podem ser deixadas de lado. Agora, o princípio não, né? O princípio do teatro oprimido não pode ser deixado de lado. Para isso, por isso que eu acho que a imagem da árvore é importante como um todo. Não só para que a gente veja lá teatro fora, jogos e tal, mas para que a gente veja também os princípios que estão nessa base e o objetivo que não é só a multiplicação, mas também as ações diretas. Eu acho que sintetizando aí o final, é mais ou menos isso.
Obrigada, Hayaldo. Obrigada pela sua fala bonita, elucidadora, em relação aos usos do TO na universidade e por promover esse engajamento crítico de todos que estão afinados com essa perspectiva de inserção do teatro do Boal e do teatro do oprimido em contextos que estão como o Douglas bem falou ontem, em guerra cultural, né? Bom, agora a gente passa para a comunicação da Kelly Howe e do Pink Flowers, que são membros da organização Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed. A Kelly é professora Kelly Howe, melhor dizendo, atua na Universidade de Loyola, Chicago, é membro do conselho e ex-presidente da organização Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed, coorganizou 3 conferências, corajosamente, e organiza agora a 4ª conferência junto à equipe do 2022 PTO Chicago, a 25ª conferência do PTO, a ser realizada em maio de 2022. Suas áreas de interesse incluem teatro do oprimido, teatro político, pedagogia, justiça da saúde e direitos pelo aborto, tradução do espanhol para o inglês e organização de redes de solidariedade internacional. Ela coeditou The Routledge Companion to Theater of the Oppressed, com Julian Boal e José Suero, essa edição que já foi mencionada por nós ontem, inclusive, tem um artigo do Douglas, tem artigos de diversos pesquisadores importantíssimos aos estudos do Boal e do teatro do oprimido. E também coeditou o Theater of the Oppressed in Actions, com Julian Boal e Scott McElvany. Kelly Howe teaches at Loyola University Chicago. She is a board member and past president of the organization Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed, PTO, of which I'm very honored to be a part of the board too. She co-organized 3 PTO conferences bravely, right, Kelly? And is now co-organizing the 4th alongside the rest of the PTO 2022 Chicago team, the 25th PTO conference, to happen in May. Some of her areas of interest include theater of the oppressed, political theater, pedagogy, health justice, and abortion rights, Spanish-English translation, and international solidarity organizing. She co-edited the Routledge Companion to Theater of the Oppressed with Julian Boal and José Suero, and Theater of the Oppressed in Actions with Julian Boal and Scott McElvany. O Pink Flowers, por sua vez, é artista, ativista e educador. Seu trabalho se baseia no antigo xamanismo, no trickster africano e nas tradições brasileiras do Coringa. Pink utiliza o teatro do oprimido, a Art of Hosting, programa de paz de justiça navarro e outras técnicas contra-opressivas, como princípios para sua prática de teatro, resolução de conflitos, mediações e terapias coletivas. É fundador da premiada companhia de teatro Falcon Works, que usa o teatro popular de modo a engendrar meios para o compromisso social e o engajamento. Recebeu reconhecimento internacional, inúmeros prêmios e menções devido ao seu trabalho comunitário. É docente da Universidade Pace e membro da companhia Shakespeare in Detroit. One minute, Pink. Let me see. I had your mini view in English here, but I guess I lost it, sorry. One minute, please. Pink Flowers is an artist, activist, and educator whose work is rooted in ancient shamanic African trickster and Brazilian joker traditions. Pink uses theater of the oppressed, art of hosting, Navarro peacemaking, and other anti-oppression techniques as the foundation of their theater-making mediation, problem-solving, and group healing practice. They are the founder of award-winning Falcon Workers Theater Company, which uses popular theater to build capacities for civic engagement and social change. They have received broad recognition, numerous awards, and citations for their community service. They are a faculty member at Pace University and a company member of Shakespeare in Detroit. Sorry about the delay. Kelly and Pink, we are so thrilled to have you with us. Thank you so much, and I pass it to you.
Thank you, Patrícia. I think I'm going to be starting. Well, first of all, thank you for having us, and I want to start just by briefly explaining what Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed is, and that's what we'll be spending most of our time talking about. In short, PTO is a US-based not-for-profit organization that hosts an annual international conference, a peer-reviewed journal, and other spaces of connection, learning, and organizing. And our mission states Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed, PTO, is an international organization that supports people whose work challenges oppressive systems by promoting critical thinking and social justice through liberatory theater and popular education. Our approaches stem from the theories and practices of both Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal. We foster collective connections to share, develop, promote, and document liberatory theater, popular education, and other revolutionary actions. Our annual conference seeks to provide an accessible, inclusive, and educational space. We actively seek both introductory sessions and those new to Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed practices, as well as advanced sessions for long-time practitioners. And to sum up, the energy of the organization really adheres to Augusto Boal's principle of multiplication, this idea that it's not simply a tool for our own liberation, but it is our responsibility as practitioners and utilizers of this work to forward it and share it within our communities. The structure of our organization, we include registered members. We have an all-volunteer board, which Kelly and Patrícia are both parts. That board helps organize what we do. There's a local committee that organizes the conference and their journal team as well. and other participants who join us for events who might not be members. So it's a pretty broad group of people. And I'll toss it to Kelly.
Thanks very much, Pink, and it's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much to everybody. And just to note, I hope there's no issue, but my cat suddenly just joined the equation here. I thought that he was asleep, so let's hope that there's not any real interruption there from that. We'll see. So PTO, I'm just giving a little bit of history about the organization. And PTO started in Omaha, Nebraska, in the US, in 1994 or 1995, depending on how you start the story, depending on where you begin the history there. And it began, the first conference was a conference on liberatory education and theater. And Augusto Boal's presence there was a central aspect, really, of that first conference. And, thinking about especially wanting to mark for this event, 90 years of Augusto Boal, right, that Augusto Boal's presence continued to be a central aspect of the PTO conference and of the existence of PTO as an organization until his passing in 2009. Paulo Freire attended in 1996. It's possible that many of you may have seen the often circulated photo of Freire and Boal together at that conference. That year, 1996, was our largest conference ever, still to this day. Having Augusto Boal and Paulo Freire together on stage drew over 800 people. And Boal came and did a workshop or multiple workshops each year until his passing. And so in addition to all of the guest practitioners and speakers we've had join us over the years, there was this ongoing collaboration with Augusto Boal, then with him and Julian Boal, who eventually started to come and facilitate together. And now that collaboration continues with Julian, and that ongoing collaboration has been really, with both Augusto and Julian, has been a consistent help, honestly, toward our organization surviving all of these years. And of course, we've also been boosted by the support of many other, our participants, featured speakers, guests, workshop facilitators, etc., in popular education and popular theater. But that enthusiasm for our survival on behalf of both Julian and Augusto has really been a long-term help to us. And what I would say, though, then, is that said, even though Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Theater of the Oppressed and the work of Augusto Boal and Paulo Freire are theoretical and practical roots of the organization, participants don't have to do work that would be overtly considered Pedagogy of the Oppressed or Theater of the Oppressed to share their work at our conference or to participate in other events. Basically, anyone interested in liberatory education practice, liberatory theater practices, or in general, organizing to dismantle oppressive systems in some way, any of those people are invited to share their work at the PTO conference, to participate in any of our other events. In its earlier years, I should say that the conference mostly attracted people who were associated with academia and theater spaces, education professors, theater practitioners, etc. But over the years, it's really been important to us to change that. And so, for example, we've had a range of conferences across especially the last decade plus, that I would say made major shifts in who was participating in our organization, although that had been happening in different ways at various moments all along. But one of the conferences that really was among those helping us broaden who was involved in PTO, who was participating in the organization, would be PTO Detroit 2017. And I'm going to toss back to Pink, who will talk about that event a little bit right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to speak on it briefly, I had been hearing about the PTO conference. I had never attended a PTO conference, but I had been working with Julian Boal for several years, and I had heard, and the collaborations that I had been doing with Julian Boal were always either in the week after or the week before the PTO conference was being held. I was working with Julian in New York City. And so there had been many conversations about some of the challenges of doing this work and trying to, the work itself was very much housed in the academy, in institutions, mostly in universities. And the idea of trying to get this work back to its roots was really meaningful to Julian. And so when the opportunity arose, I was living in Detroit, and I had been a part of several conferences that had been planned, social justice conferences, the North American Social Solidarity Economy Forum, the Allied Media Project, which hosts the Allied Media Conference every year. So there's a core of energy, of social justice energy and anti-oppression energy that already existed in Detroit. So it seemed to me a no-brainer. And of course, when I was tapped to be the lead organizer, I was honored, and I thought, of course, we can do this. And of course, as I suspected, members of the Detroit community, the activism community, the organizing community, stepped to the forefront to be the local organizing committee, and we ended up hosting that event in a local historic movement space, the Cass Commons, which was a Lutheran church that became a gathering space during Black Power movement and other liberation movements. And so to be suddenly outside of the academy, supported by the academy, we were also supported by Wayne State University, but to be supported outside of housed outside of the academy was an opportunity to bring so many people who had not been introduced to this work at all. And there were obviously challenges because in universities being resourced, there are not the same accessibility issues that are present in less resourced spaces, but the community really came together. And by the community, I mean Detroit organizing activist social justice community and the larger international Theater of the Oppressed and Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed community came together to make what I think was a beautiful conference. And part of the proof of that work is that, I became a member of the board. And so that work continues now in Chicago. And Kelly, why don't you talk a little bit about what's happening now with the current conference?
Absolutely. I will say, around what Pink was talking about, right, that PTO has made a conscious effort, right, to rethink how we do what we do and the kind of spaces we host and who the organization is really for. And so now we have a wider range of people participating in our events and on our board: teachers, students, researchers, facilitators, precarious workers, of various kinds, worker organizers, community organizers, activists. And I would note, and this actually sort of sets up, right, the conference being in Chicago again in 2022, right, that, for example, I would say an especially memorable moment, one of the most memorable moments in my experiences with PTO would be a forum theater performance at PTO 2018 by a group known as Chicago Workers Collaborative. And Chicago Workers Collaborative is, and I wanted to make sure I was describing them in their own words, but currently they describe themselves as being for their mission being for what they describe as alt workers, right? Alt workers to promote the creation of stable living wage jobs with racial and gender equity in and through leadership development, advocacy, direct action, and community accountability. So this is a Chicago organization that then had traveled together to the conference that was in Pennsylvania that year, and their forum theater performance about the working conditions of temporary workers in and around Chicago. I think even though there had been lots of other conversations and performances at past conferences about really important work from so many different directions, I think it was among those moments that really reminded us, right, of the work that PTO still has to do, right, in terms of making sure it's a space where the work of groups like Chicago Workers Collaborative can be as central as possible, right? And so CWC, Chicago Workers Collaborative, they went on to be represented on the PTO board itself, and then on the planning committee for PTO, the Chicago 2022, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. But we also have a lot more work to do to make sure that people that see PTO as a valuable space for people working in social movements. And we have a lot of work to do, I think, to keep sharpening the conditions for critical thinking informed by political organizing, right? And I think that we can do that even more than we currently are now. Over the years, too, though we have usually had participants from many parts of the world, certainly language has played a role in who has joined us. And for a long time, I would say that the conference was strongly English dominant. And in recent years, however, we've been able to expand our capacity to accept proposals and host sessions in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And Pink is going to say a little bit more about our conferences in general before I give a little bit more information, some of the practical information about Chicago 2022.
I mean, I'm thinking I'm looking at the timing, and there's so much to share in so little time. I mean, I will say there have been some really magical highlights in the time with the conference because of the way that we have intentionally moved away from simply having it, an academic exercise. In the first conference, there was an opportunity to bring together. I mean, for example, when the board showed up in Detroit, we were welcome into, homes of people from the community. My neighbors were, people who were also included on the board. I'm just several blocks away from the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center. They were also very much involved. And then in the next year, I was able to bring a group from Brooklyn to participate in the conference, and we presented a forum play that had been written by 12-year-old who was autistic, who had written a play about their challenges in the traditional education system, in the regular, trying to fit into the regular education system. And to present a play about the education system by someone who had been the target of a particular type of oppression to a group of educators, and the dialogue that started from that were, these are the things that can really only happen in those spaces when we're bringing together, what would be considered the general population to talk about the issues that the general population is dealing with. And having it be presented by the people who are, the targets of that oppression and who are doing that liberatory work. I think that's really the only thing that I would want to add as far as the conferences are concerned. So, Kelly, did you want to say anything more in particular about the upcoming conference,
Absolutely.
The 2022 conference?
Yeah, absolutely. So our next conference will be in May in 2022, and that is a postponed conference from 2020 for obvious reasons, I think. And the pre-conference, we're going to have a pre-conference workshop, so a smaller group working environment, which will be facilitated by Julian Boal from May 24th to May 26th, and then the full conference will take place from May 26th to May 29th. We'll also have an online day, so for anyone who might be interested in participating but might not be able to join us in Chicago, there is the option to apply to share about one's work during that online day. And the conference theme is Popular Power. And Popular Power, Poder Popular, and it will be a conference that, like I said, is accepting proposals in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And what I would note is that, yes, it's PTO's 25th conference. I think that was mentioned earlier. And that Chicago obviously has a vibrant history and present in terms of political organizing and activism. And that informs how we think about the gathering. And to give a sense of who is involved in shaping the experience that will happen here, our local organizing committee includes worker organizers, health organizers, teaching artists, and other people working in arts education, theater artists, students, university professors, among others. A group from Escola de Teatro Popular in Rio de Janeiro will be featured in one of our all-conference or plenary keynote sessions, whatever you want to call it. We usually just say everybody together. But they will be joining us, and we hope in person, all paperwork pending. We hope they'll be with us in person as our guests. And we will have other all-conference sessions on topics like worker organizing through theater, popular education, and education organizing in Chicago, featuring youth and adult organizers. And the deadline for proposed sessions is January 10th. And we'd be really happy to answer any questions, or even to just be directly and actively of assistance for anybody who might like to apply to present. So a couple of quick things about some other things that PTO does besides conferences. One of the things in which Patrícia is extremely active, and Patrícia could even speak to much better than we could, right, is the Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed journal. And so for much of the second half of its history, PTO has hosted a peer review journal. And that journal hosts more traditional, right, journal articles, as well as contributions in many other formats that are historically less common in academic spaces and academic journals specifically. And I think it's fair to say, right, that one of the key goals is to be a journal that feels accessible to people who might not usually ever apply to present or apply to conferences, apply to be part of a journal, right, who might never have written a journal article before in their lives, right? That's one of the goals among many, is to be a journal that is for as many people as possible. And Patrícia and Aaron Moore-Ellis, our new co-editors, are already thinking in exciting ways about how to expand the range of articles we can accept in terms of language and other considerations. And obviously, Patrícia could say much more about that. But this year we tried to make the journal more broadly accessible through kind of what we call journal spotlight events. So online events where people would come together and talk about a particular article within the journal itself. And then I would say the other thing to note is that we try to host some other online spaces so that it doesn't feel so much like what we have is a one-off conference event each year. And I think it relates to this question of how to hold sustained critical thinking spaces. And we've been hosting a range of events this year, including, for example, Global Solidarity, what we were calling coffee and tea hours, but just for lack of a better term, to kind of capture the idea that you don't have to have anything prepared to join us for those conversations, right? They're just gatherings. And we had sessions on the effects of COVID-19 in the places where various participants in those conversations live, the material consequences of the pandemic and the unevenly felt material consequences, a session on vaccine inequality and vaccine nationalism, right? And so there are a range of different kinds of ways that we try to gather people. And during the pandemic, like so many, this moving to hosting workshops and talks online, however, sometimes in certain moments frustrating that can feel, was obviously a big part of our work with, like most other organizations. So for example, hosting online sequences of workshops with Julian Boal last year. So talks and workshops in Spanish and English. And then I guess I would also note, in case this would ever be of interest to anyone, we also sometimes issue, for example, when groups are looking for statements of solidarity with broader movements in which they're working, or projects that their own organizations are working on, broader social movement work, right? PTO as an organization tries to be present to those kinds of not only requests, but to actively anticipate them and to be of support in any way that we can, signing on to those kinds of broader efforts, and also trying to initiate in our own situations where we live, the various members of the organization and the board. And I'm going to go ahead and toss to Pink to talk a little bit about the PTO board itself as a space.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I guess as I'm listening to Kelly talk about the work of the organization, as I'm talking about the work of the organization, I have to kind of pinch myself to remember that the lion's share of this work is being done by 15 or so volunteers from around the world who, no one's collecting a salary, give their time to work in a very, very grassroots model, serving as, oversight for the organization. But really the thread that keeps the organization happening from conference to conference, and linking the work that is done from one conference to the next, and maintaining relationships that are built from one conference to the next. The way our board looks is we show up once a month and hold a meeting where we discuss the work that's being done by various committees on the board. Those committees include a Global Solidarity Committee, Community Engagement Committee, Accountability Committee, a Resource Development Committee, and others are sometimes formed based on things that might be happening. There's certainly a committee that is dedicated to looking for where we might be presenting the conference in the future. So there's a current conference committee and a future conference committee. That said, there are challenges that we face as an organization that is trying to do work on a global scale with about the resources that, you know, the financial resources of the organization are constantly being fed into the conference and then being sort of made back from the conference. So that's where it's sort of where most of the money of the organization goes and is generated. And so, you know, just some of the challenges that we face specifically as a membership organization is, you know, what does it mean to be a member and to have agency as a member and to be served as a member? So we're, you know, consistently seeking to improve the ways that we communicate with members and that we engage members through their participation in the work. Because it's a, you know, because it's a volunteer, you know, labor resources, there, you know, the conference basically becomes self-sustaining. It's also difficult to do a conference of this nature, any work of this nature, in, you know, a country that is so powerfully individualistic, neoliberal, in a country that's responsible for and complicit in so many of the situations that our participants from elsewhere end up being in. And so, you know, those are, you know, we understand that there are dire consequences to some of the energy that is coming from the space that we're working from. So Kelly, is there anything that you wanted to say, any more that you wanted to say about that?
Sure. I think that something that we try to be very mindful of, right, is what it means to have a reality that as an organization that just needs a basic like legal home, right? So a place where there can be literally a bank account that exists that we can use even just to do the very basic things that we do, right? We're a not-for-profit organization, but even just to have that, right? It means that then you enter into the political frame, it's not a political organization technically, right? It's a not-for-profit organization, but you enter into the broader frame of the not-for-profit complex in the United States, right? And that can involve a lot of complexities, right? When it comes to things like hosting the conference physically here in the US. I'm in Chicago right now, right? Historically, that's been where we've had the conference, although we do have interest in trying to figure out the logistics of having the conference outside the US as well in the future. But there are a lot of complexities that arise there in terms of trying to be, as much as we can, sincerely an organization, an international organization, sincerely, right? But then with the complexities of being rooted somewhere that, for example, right, the complexity of people trying to apply for visas to be here in the U.S. physically with us, among and going through the incredibly complex process of that, and a process that can be a lot of adjectives that I won't even get to describing here, right? But a process that can be really difficult. And so those are some of the things that we are thinking about, that I think we're going to need to figure out even more ways to navigate and better in the future, right? We also have, I think, the difficulty of, especially with an all-volunteer organizing committee, the difficulty of connecting one conference to another. And I think this is something that gets talked about a lot in the broader theater of the oppressed communities around the world, right? This question of how to not have, when you all get together in a gathering, how to not have it feel like a one-off event that doesn't really connect to broader work over time. And I think that there are many ways that we have connected to broader work over time, but I still think that element, I think a lot of us think that element could be stronger, right, by far. And then also, I would say that we run into complexities around holding good relationships in terms of across the different, how shall I say this? So we have an organization that is planned at the local level, but then it also needs to make sure that it is serving a much broader community than the local community, while also being ethically rooted in that local community, right? So all of these kinds of complexities are things that I think we really try to navigate carefully. And I think we're still learning how to do that better and better. And as I was saying earlier, I think we would like to continue to build stronger, deeper, and more connections with social movements directly than we currently have right now. And I think that Pink was going to talk about a few others.
Yes, and I just wanted to get just make sure that we're okay for time. I think we are. Yes, Patrícia.
Yeah, you are, definitely.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, well then, Kelly was talking about, the work of linking the work that occurs in one particular year or in one particular event to other work that is being done, not only within the organization, but within the larger community of the organization. For example, when we appeared in Pueblo, Colorado, we were working with a lot of the local Chicana activists in that area around very specific campaigns that were happening at the time. One of them was around the celebration of Christopher Columbus that continues to happen in the US. And that particular holiday, Columbus Day, started in Pueblo, Colorado. So the indigenous community there is very, very active in trying to address that. So when we show up in a community where that kind of work is being done, how do we stay engaged? Do we go back to communities that we've already been in? Do we bring the conference back? Do we plan other events in those areas to support and uplift the work that's being done in those communities? And this is happening everywhere we go, and we understand that it's happening all around the world as well. So as Kelly said, how can we bring ourselves into spaces so that we can be a resource and not just a showcase for this work, but a real resource to people who are engaged in struggles wherever they are, who could benefit from the kind of critical analysis that is embedded in the work of Augusto Boal. We certainly would like to expand the board. We're now, we have board members in Brazil, we have board members in Africa, we have board members across the US, but I think as we are seeking to be more of an internationally rooted organization, to have representations from all places in the world where this work is being done. And then there are just the logistical issues of being under-resourced as an organization. We are limited as to languages that can be served at any particular conference. We are limited as to where food comes from, because often we are working in spaces where there are contracts with food providers who, we may struggle with the politics of some of the partners who are involved with the spaces who host us as a conference and host us as an organization. There's economic accessibility. People who are engaged in this struggle don't necessarily have the funds to travel to be at a conference, and that should not limit anyone's ability to engage in this work. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so embedded in institutions, is that institutions will often fund their faculties and staff to go to conferences, and that is not true on a grassroots level. So finding ways to deal with that. And then also just the fact that we're dealing with, global white supremacy. And so just the look and feel and language and what looks right to us as individuals is being informed by racism and sexism and homophobia and all of these things that we're struggling against, but they're operating, internally, that internal oppressor that gets talked about in this work. So those are just a few of the challenges, and I'm sure that there are critics that we would love to hear from who could help us learn more what work we could do to grow closer to, I think, our goal of being, truly accessible to the general anti-oppression, social solidarity, and social justice community worldwide. So that's it. Kelly, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we end?
I don't think so. Just to say thank you so much. And you could find out more about some of the things that we were talking about on PTO's website, ptoweb.org. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Obrigado.
Obrigada, Pink. Obrigada, Kelly, for the enlightening presentation of ours. Thank you so much. Now, let's hear more about Chetna's work. So, Chetna Mehrotra é fundadora da organização de teatro aplicado Hangumi, a Happy Playground. Ela é praticante de teatro aplicado, facilitadora de teatro, praticante de TO, praticante do Playback Theater e praticante do movimento autor. Então, membro do Conselho da Rede Internacional da Câmara de Comércio e Indústria de Mulheres da Índia e membro do Comitê da Aliança de Educadores de Arte e de Drama da Índia. Treinou praticantes de vários lugares do mundo e teve seus escritos publicados pela revista Pedagogy and Theatre of the Oppressed. É revisora do Rede, Pesquisa em Educação Teatral, revista de performance e teatro aplicado. Chetna Mehrotra is a founder of an applied theater organization named Hangumi, a Happy Playground. She is an applied theater practitioner, a drama-based learning facilitator, a TO practitioner, playback theater practitioner, and a movement practitioner. She is also a board member of International Playback Theater Network and Pedagogy and Theatre of the Oppressed. Women Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Maharashtra, India, and an advisory committee member in India Drama and Arts Educators Alliance. She has trained participants across borders and has been published by Pedagogy and Theatre of the Oppressed Journal. She's on the review panel of RIDE, Research in Drama Education, the Journal of Applied Theatre and Performance. Good evening, Chetna. So I pass to you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Patricia. Namaste, everybody. My name is Chetna, and I'm very delighted to be here to share this space with Hayaldo, Pink, and Kelly. Good to be amongst our friends across borders. My colleague Roshan will be sharing some PPT, but before that, our proposal here is to share our work with the children, and my main interest in our work of applied theatre rests with the system of design and education. And before I move, I must set some context about how Theatre of the Oppressed looks in India, in Indian context. Some of the contextualities is that we are a multicultural society, multi-layered. Every 5 kilometers, the cuisine and the language change. We are highly family-oriented, community-oriented people. Well, I'm saying all this because all this has implications when we move to classrooms. So that's the Guru-Shishya Parampara, which is the teacher-student relationship, is highly revered. It can be very oppressive and constrictive in some moments. Teaching and doctors as a profession is still highly, they're called the noble professions in our society. There is a lot of power dynamics that happens between teacher-student, student-parent, and the school and the parent. And I also must say there is a huge top-down approach on the policymaker in the education system here. It's a highly pyramidal system where the policymakers sit somewhere else and the one who consumes and uses and tastes is somewhere together, absolutely somewhere else. So these are some of the contextualities and the system of education. Besides, we know that the highly industrialized and colonized way of education that happens in classrooms, right from language gestures that children are fined if they don't speak in English. That is a big mark here where we are. So that is the context. And before I move ahead, I must share, as I open a lot of my forum theaters with a story from an Indian epic, Ramayana. And that's how you will get a glimpse of what we as a society in the Indian context, we are. So this is a little story about how Lord Rama, a very famous hero in an epic Ramayana, with his wife and younger brother are exiled in a forest. While in the forest under a tree, while King Rama and his wife wait, the younger brother Lakshman rushes to Rama and says, "Bhaiya, brother, here's what I've got. I saved a deer. There was a tiger after him today." So the wife, Sita, such nurturing feminine energy, says, "That's beautiful. Thank you for saving. You're such a joy, such a gift." And this younger brother, as I said, the family context, the elder one is the one who really validates. He's waiting for his elder brother to say something, appreciate. The elder brother just smiles, Lord Rama, and the younger brother says, "You wouldn't say anything, Bhaiya, brother." He says, "Well, you did save a deer, but you took somebody's food today too." So, well, this is the complexity that we all live in here. What the right and the wrongness is all, we don't know where we kind of share what in terms of our the grays in between. So with this context setting, I'm going to invite Roshan to share the slides so that we can go ahead. So our work today will be a sharing about Rangbhumi and our work with schools and NGOs in the slums and the rural areas that we work with, teachers and children. Rangbhumi is an applied theater organization which was founded with the vision of spreading joyousness, abundance, power of expression, compassion, love, and sense of equivalence amongst people. Hence the name Rangbhumi. Well, for our listeners and people who are watching us, Rangbhumi in English translates to Rang, which is colors, and Bhumi is earth. So the land or the earth of colors, and we invite all the colors and embrace all the colors. So let's go ahead and see the kind of applied theater practices. We borrow practices from Drama for Learning and Reflection, Theater and Education, the work of Dorothy Headcoat, Peter Slade, John Dewey, Playback Theater, Creative Drama, Theater of the Oppressed, Participatory Research Program, Grips Theater, Performance Art, and of course, nevertheless to say, online applied theater programs in today's world. Well, today we'll speak about the journey with three of our spaces. The first one is a school, which is in an Indian context called a private school. And in India, there are about 4 to 5 educational affiliated boards. There are about 3 Indian boards. And nowadays, we also have the UK board, the Cambridge board. There is IB, Interbaccalaureate. And this school follows the Indian affiliation curriculum. So this is where we started our journey in 2013 and until present. So Lokhandwala Foundation School, that's how we pronounce it, is a space in Mumbai where this mostly, if you see, the children who come here are children and sons and daughters of the second generation, people who are generally people not from Mumbai. There are people who come and migrated to Mumbai, to generally people from the north of India who come here for better prospects and a better materialistic life, which they don't get in any parts of where they are natives from. So that's a word here because that's how their children view struggles, they view conflicts, they view their claiming of spaces when they come to bigger cities. Yeah. So these are the curriculum frameworks that we create around our work around with. So there's theater and education. We work from grade 1 through 9. Grade 3 to 9, and we work. Our curriculum framework includes drama for learning, playback theater, theater and education, creative drama, theater of the oppressed. And we also adapted a lot of theater of the oppressed with the Indian epics, like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which I'll talk shortly about. Yes. So the work began in 2013 with when I started working in the schools. Especially in the second, third week itself, we started to sense a lot of bullying, which happens in school. But this bullying was more towards, as I said in my earlier context, where children from outside of Mumbai also come in, especially from the north of India. And there is this subtle underlying boundaries that the children here and from outside share with each other. So there is a subtle competitiveness that kind of occurs, and that leads to a lot of the othering of the communities. So this was, if you see one in colors with the scarves and the orange scarves, is what we adapted, a very Indian method of street play we call Nukkad Natak, which a lot of credit goes to Sir Badal Sarkar, who started this, and we adopted it into a forum theater. We did like an adaptation, because this is something which every Indian child would know in a school, to do street theater. So we did this process of bullying. We launched a kindness campaign, which was a one-year campaign with forum theater performances in school festivals. Every class and every drama class created these spurts of forum theater performances along with the street theater format. Because if you see, the dress which they're wearing is a typical street theater format, so it makes them more acceptable to the crowd they go to in. We also did a lot of public engagement programs through forum theater and street theater programs, where we had many people in the crowd coming in and just getting choked about their experiences of childhood. So this is one format. And second format, if you see the girls here, this is a very recent photo I thought I must share about a recent newspaper article which had all male panel, and the sideline and the headline was "Remarkable Flying India." And these girls were very agitated that there is not one woman from the banking sector. So they wanted to create, we launched a campaign on Facebook through image theater, trying to convey, where are we? We are not seen. So they launched this image theater campaign, and we had flooded the Facebook and schools groups with these image theater. And well, lo and behold, the second day, the organizers of the panel had 5 women who came on the panel overnight. So that was a little respite, but they're not very celebratory about it. Yes. And as we moved ahead in our journey, this is how our curriculum framework works. Theater of the Oppressed is generally done with children who are 12 plus to about 16 years old. And we take them through basic processes of Boal spoke about, knowing the body, making the body more expressive, moving to theater as a language and theater as a discourse. So as Boal listed out in Poetics of the Oppressed, we generally start with theater, games and exercises, moving to understanding the body, where we are, and then moving to what is it that we want to express. And if you see the slides below here, this is an excerpt from Mahabharata. We are actually looking now from 16 stories from Mahabharata, from perspectives of various heroes and heroines and other genders too. Mahabharata, as typically, if you look at, has beautiful descriptions of all genders included, and our endeavor is to be inclusive of all colors, as we said in our work. And if you see a snippet of, this is a story of one of the heroes in Mahabharata with his wife, where they're exiled. And the children would read this story. They go into breakout rooms or smaller groups. They share who's struggling, where's the power dynamics. Like, for example, in this one, the wife Draupadi, who's the queen, she was the one who was being approached with sexual advances from one of the kings, and she had to bear it. So the students spoke about how they relate to as people, as women, as men, as all genders, and what is the power struggle here, who's responsible, who can change it, and then they contextualized it to today's spaces. where we've had some very, very, very grim and gory incidents of rapes and sexual violence against women. And this is our next step. And then they create forums and display these forums in front of various stakeholders, their parents, children, and principals. So that's how we link the epics with the Mahabharata, the theater of the oppressed with the epics. This is, as we say in Indian context, children are very happy about street theater, making posters and going from one street to another and launching their campaigns. This is on No Bullying, where this is a show after a forum theater performance. This is a photograph. And the children, if you see, lying on the ground, is in the drama classroom. This is a space where we looked at a girl, infant, if you see, female feticide. So these are grade 6 students, and they wanted to do something around, and this was about a few years ago when in Delhi, which is the capital city of India, the Nirbhaya case happened where this young girl was sexually assaulted in very brutal way by 6 men in the bus, and the children were very aggrieved about it, very sad and frustrated. So we tried to create these images. If you see the girl lying on the floor, the boys around, so we created this as a space, and then we took this space to other classes. I mean, one class grade would perform for another. So this was a chain of performances where also the principal of the school also watched this. There were teachers in this forum theaters performance. So if you see, these are, especially in this school, through these forum theater and theater of the oppressed and playback theater is also something that we do with children. We've tried to create the 4S in the S model, in the letter S in English. We say Shiksha, Samvad, and Sanskritik Kendra. So in English, Shiksha translates to education, Samvad to open dialoguing opportunity, and Sanskritik Kendra is to arts and cultural hub. So with this school, we've been working almost for 9 years now, and through these through this curriculum framework, we've been able to create a collective community, a space where there's an art center. We've actually, in a school, we've created an art center where children perform. We've hosted playback theater festivals, TO festivals, street theater, annual plays. So it's become a space where even parents, teachers, international facilitators have come down from New Zealand. We've had Evan Hastings, who's a TO shadow practitioner, came down and he spoke about to the adolescent children about shadow liberatory theater, about sexual violence and abuses at home, and the children got an opportunity to learn from him. Yes. So this was about Lokhandwala School, and this is a forum theater performance which is happening live. If you see, these children are sitting. A forum theater call, what we do as race forum. This is around the competition and privileges that one gets being in a certain type of school. Yes, as I said, in India, there are types of schools. If you go to a certain school, in fact, it's called the English school. If you go to a school which gives you all the ACs and buses and English-speaking teachers, and then there are these schools which are very, very, they don't even have teachers. That's the polarity we're looking at. And we did this race forum where there were 3 runners, where 2 with, if you see the chairs are the barriers in front of these runners, and there's 1 runner who had no barrier. And there was this one referee who would say 1, 2, 3 and live. And so, of course, the privileged runner always won. He or she, and they had no barriers. So this was a forum theater we did with children and teachers and the principal. You could see the power dynamics where the principal sitting right in the middle speaks for itself. And when we had some very interesting interventions where a child came up and said that, listen, why don't you change the referee of the game? I don't like the referee. He or she, they are the one who controlling this game. So the principal was sitting right there, and she definitely did understand the message and spoke about that how the power dynamics from a leader or principal or a teacher can trickle down in classrooms too. And if you see the girl in the yellow, on the yellow cardboard is writing a reflections, where we had reflections. Every session we end, we have a reflection board in the school where we note down and we document these processes. If you read, it talks about it's an unfair race. I feel cheated. I felt cheated. And this is an ugly competition and much more. And we move to Bombay Scottish. So this is another school that we wanted to share our journey, and very interesting forum theatre and theatre of the oppressed work that happened here. This is another school in Mumbai, in almost the central Mumbai. And this school has a very different population, where these are children who come from spaces where these parents, both parents work, and they are either employed in multinational companies. There are not many business entrepreneurs, so they have a very different feel to education. They are generally, this is a Catholic school, and so we will just show you the themes that we worked around with, and these themes were chosen by grades 6, 7, and 8. These are, especially the theme around violence against women was very strong, women protection and safety, discrimination, peer pressure, road safety, and bullying. And if we look at women protection and safety and violence against women, it's something which generally in all schools in India that we've worked with are two prominent themes that come out all the time on violence and sexual violence and women's safety. In fact, one of the spaces in the process of creating a forum theatre, a boy said that, he never knew that women are so unsafe. So that was a revelation for the girls there, who said that it's very difficult for them to even go out at 7:30 p.m. or 8 p.m. in the night alone to even get a slice, a loaf of bread from the market. So these are some of the exchanges that happen in classrooms, where there's a lot of gender sensitivity that's created through these rehearsal and processes of theatre of the oppressed. These are some circle time. This is how probably wanted to show you a process of how we start a class. There is this warm up, and then we move to some exercises. We do some work around main engagement. What are we looking at if you're working on road safety or women, violence against women? We create a main engagement theatre work. And this is like a curriculum which runs about 35 to 37 sessions in a year. And it is again it moves into the next following year too. So there is a whole process of even following up. So if you see some of the children here, also this is about 4 or 5 years ago, they are a part of our forum theatre shows now. They still are attached to our group, and they still perform with us. And this is at the end, we do like a circle sharing where each one shares about how they felt through the day. And they also journal it in the books back. So this is a forum, this is a letter which a child wrote to the young bikers and the truck drivers. And we also sent it to the officials, the local official, the school sent it to them. And this is a very famous, we would know as TO practitioners maybe, a Colombian hypnosis. This is a practice on a process where we created a forum on violence against women. Just a general classroom of how it may look. Well, we now transition to another section of work in these urban slums of Mumbai, which we've been engaged with for almost 2 years now, with an NGO called Spark a Change. Spark a Change works with children who go to schools, and these are children of migrant workers from Nepal, from eastern belt of India, and who come to, they are first generation learners whose parents have never been to a school. And very important, I must say, that they live in small spaces. I mean, in English, I don't know how to call it, but they are very smaller spaces, like a box space with 10, 12 people in the same room, because they come here for work engagements to earn more. Sometimes there are families who stay together, like we've had children who would have 15 people staying in one room and one small kitchen. So Spark a Change Foundation, and these children, sometimes they have to, especially the girls, they probably, they are the ones who have very low attendance in schools, because they are the ones who are stopped going to, they're asked to not go to schools because they would help their mothers at home for household chores, and also to earn extra income for their families. while the boys will go to school more. So Sparka Jain Foundation works in the post-school hour support, where these children come to a garden area, which is gifted by a very sweet person that owns that garden. So they come to the garden area, and from 4 o'clock in the evening, they also receive support in their academics through a set of volunteers. So the owner reached out to us, the founder, and she said that these children have been losing, especially their purpose, and they've been going wayward since the COVID started. So we met them, and we did a small intervention using playback theatre and theatre of the oppressed on unexpressed fear. It was a 25 days work. And then once we completed that, it was a very powerful work. Children created some amazingly very powerful, intense poetries. We used a lot of work from the aesthetics of the oppressed, create poetry creation and language, especially because they spoke varied languages, because they're people from Nepal and Bihar, the Eastern Belt and Uttar Pradesh. And then they're asked to speak in English in schools where they don't have English teachers. So the communication was another, language piece was another thing that we got them to kind of agree on with, and gave them their individual spaces. So they came out with, and what we did is a letter writing process in the process of foreign theater rehearsals, where they wrote letters to their fears. And there were some very powerful and yet intense letters, what they wrote, which they have never spoken to anybody about. And once this was completed, we went to phase 2, which was a complete phase 2 of a 1-year program, almost an 8-9 months program on theater of the oppressed. And this, if you may, this was done online. Yes, there were many challenges, but these children wanted to come back because this space gave them a place to speak, a place to share space with other friends of theirs. And then the phase 3 will happen in March 2022, where the children loved this theater of the oppressed work, and they would like to now learn this theater of the oppressed work and take it to their communities and facilitate the social justice and impact work that they want to do in their community. So well, we definitely had challenges here. Like, for example, if we look at the slides here, the next slides, maybe, Roshan. The challenges were that, of course, the participants and facilitators, we never met each other, and we were almost virtually being introduced to each other. And of course, the lack of device, where they come from, that their parents would have only one device to log in, like a mother and father would have one each. So we would set the time where the mother would come back from her domestic, from her professional commitments, because they work in resident societies as cleaners, as garbage pickers. So when they come back, that's when the children get their devices. And some of them, they would share devices. Like there were 4-5 of them would share one device. And also they would get this space where they would collect at a space, because at home there was too much of noise and people moving. And sometimes they would also face police brutality because their space was so crunched and they wanted to move out during COVID and the police would not understand. So there was another session that they wanted to do this. They said, we want to see how the police feels. Can we do something around that? So we also did around of how, we created a forum called the Identity ID, where we looked at police and then they, as the parents, line up for rations during the COVID. Very difficult that time. They had to gather rations. I mean, I've seen it from my own eyes, and I must have this gratitude for the privilege I share. And how the police would kind of beat them up to be in lines, in queues, and they would only have certain hours when these ration shops will open. So that's the kind of systems of spaces that they lived in. And of course, we all know that this work of TO or any theater work has this texture and element of space and movement. So that was another challenge that we had. But yes, kudos to these children that they did their best that they could. So the primary work objective that we wanted to create was a non-hierarchical space, because they had a lot of fear of their teachers. back in the schools, because as I said, this was not an English school. This was a school where there are 70, 75 children in a classroom. The teachers won't turn up many times. There's violence, physical violence. The teachers would beat these children. So they have a huge fear of even asking a doubt in the academic subject too. So that is what we wanted to look at. And as the children belong to the migrant workers' families, they had major survival issues because of that their creativity and expression and even their dreams of aspirations were very stifled, and they had no space where they could go and share. And then the idea was to give them a space of expression where also the different genders could get together and speak and share without any inhibitions. Well, these are, and if you see at the end, we got some special permission from the local government to create these a special performance where we only had 30 people in a gathering. This was a culmination done this February where these 50 children performed. In fact, it was very, there are two of them or very individual performances too, where they wanted to create their ideas about education system especially, and their idea about learning, designing the education system, which was not in their hands ever. And also most of them are lost that we are well educated, but where are the jobs? Why don't we get the jobs? And why can't we be included in the space of getting or a job, which is, because in India, a lot of these higher education universities demand a lot of donation money, maybe in lakhs, and they don't have the capacity. So that gives them this frustration of, okay, if I cross grade 12, then what happens after that? I may have to do the same work as my father and mother did. So they presented these forums. And if you see the next slide is what some of the questions they would ask. So this is our rehearsal space, the garden space where we met, we played games, we sang songs. So songs are a very important part of our rehearsal process, where they like to sing their native songs in their native languages, in Hindi, sometimes Bollywood music too. And if you see the education, the questions that they want to, also if you see the prizes of the book, on the WhatsApp group that is shared with permission, the prices of the books is very steep, and they're asked to buy these books, and there's no support. And if you see, there's physical hitting to stop in schools. Also the quota systems, because there's some reservation for certain children from certain backgrounds, and their seats are snatched away from them. So this is what we created, and we also had people in the audience who were part of this, the teaching community, the governance community. So, and this is towards the end. And so what we did is we gathered these children from all schools, Lokanwala, Bombay Scottish, they were homeschoolers, and we created last year with Mark Winberg, from the Expedia member, I guess, we created this performance called Raise Your Hands Only If You Know the Right Answer. So this is a representation of what an Indian classroom would look like, where there are many, many students, and only the ones who are absolutely good at or speak well and are articulate enough, they are the ones always selected to do things. So these children wanted to create, and these are 11 or 12 years old children who created this forum, scripted, composed. We were guiding them, Mark, Roshan, all of us were a part of this team who were guiding them. And then we created this forum, and we actually took them to many audiences worldwide. This is performed for parents and children in India. If you see, these are the children who belong to these schools that I earlier spoke about. And we also took this to the UK, where we did this work with the City Lions in the UK. To the University of Washington, and also with a lot of people from Italy, Spain, and varied audience around the world. And these are the children from Westminster, City Lions, London. And very interesting to know that students all across the world shared very universal issues of who holds the power to design their education, why are children not included in the education, where are my seats in the round table of the education making policy. And One of the child also spoke about how a metaphor of how the teacher and student are like the oil and water. We will never mix. We may coexist, but we'll never mix. We cannot. So this is a performance, Forum Theatre Series performance that we did and exchanged cultural notes post the performance. So further on, this is the impact and the dreams we all hold back as an Indian context and in schools that we strive to work with in spaces of urban slums and rural India, is deeper reflective capacities for life and their social person experiences, enhanced sense of belongingness to the community, a research-based outlook for the systemic issues in their everyday governance, and critical consciousness towards education and learning design systems. I think with this, I end my submission. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Chetna, for your beautiful work and beautiful, inspiring work. Paulo Barja just made a comment. He said, such inspiring practices in such defined contexts. Brazil and India certainly share similarities in social inequalities. Your speech motivates us to go ahead and propose activities for young students. And also Clara de Andrade said, thank you very much to all. Congratulations, great presentations. I have a question to all the participants. We have 3 final minutes, Clara. I hope we have the time. How do you think international local networks support or affect TO's work nowadays? I also have some questions for you. I'll ask Pink and Kelly first. First of all, thank you so much for your beautiful work of creating networks for liberatory actions, being aware of the problems related to accessibility, language justice, and all sorts of problems emerged in neoliberal times. You said that PTO, Pink said, to be more specifically, PTO board members are conscious of their necessity of agency. You said that. But I think that PTO conference also aims to provide people with the consciousness of the necessity of agency by maintaining relationships between the conferences and so on. Knowing that, what do you think about creating an online conference, gathering different people in different spaces with different problems related to oppression? And a question that interests me the most, what do you think about hosting a conference maybe in Brazil? And Chetna, thank you so much. And I wanted to know if these works that you present us today, if they go to different spaces, if they are presented in different spaces. And I also want to ask you to to talk about Mumbai's context, because we are so distant from Mumbai, but we, as Paulo Barja mentioned, we share a lot of similarities. So I would like to ask you to talk a little bit more about that. E Hayaldo, speaking in Portuguese. Hayaldo, obrigada pela sua apresentação, obrigada pelo seu trabalho, por estar conosco no GTPOL, por compartilhar seu conhecimento, sua experiência e oferecer seu relato. E eu queria te pedir para contar para a gente um pouco mais dessa análise crítica que você tão bem falou ser necessária quando a gente lida com o teatro do oprimido. esse exercício que tem que estar sempre em curso, que tem que ser processual, que nunca pode estar detido na confecção de produtos, né? Mas sim no desenvolvimento de processos liberatórios, de processos críticos. Na universidade, e você como membro docente, sem querer pressionar, mas como que você lida com isso? Tem alguma forma de atuação que você sugere, até mesmo um pedido de, enfim, de ajuda, para você compartilhar seu saber conosco? O que você sugere que a gente possa fazer, nós que atuamos no campo da pedagogia, para tornar esse exercício um exercício contra-hegemônico, contra-manualístico, se é que essa palavra existe, e processual? Se você quiser começar, você topa?
Beleza, eu vou começar. Eu acho que até a pergunta se conecta com a pergunta da Clara de Andrade aqui, né, sobre como essas redes elas afetam. Porque eu acho que, na verdade, o grande desafio hoje, eu acho, do teatro oprimido nas universidades brasileiras é justamente esse que você apontou, Patrícia. É a gente conseguir fazer com que o teatro oprimido ele não entre nesse caminho manualístico, né? Só esse termo aí. Ao mesmo tempo, essa coisa do manual que a gente precisa evitar, ao mesmo tempo a gente precisa ter muito claro quais são os objetivos das nossas ações quando a gente faz o teatro oprimido. Então, é o processo dialético, né? O tempo todo. Eu particularmente, eu trabalho numa universidade que não tem pós-graduação, não tem nada, mas que tem uma galera com muita vontade de estar junto, trabalhando. E eu acho que o caminho é esse. Se a gente tem o espaço do teatro oprimido dentro de uma universidade brasileira, eu acho que a ideia é que o desenvolvimento, na minha proposta, aí você perguntou qual seria uma proposta, eu acho que essa ideia de sempre ter um laboratório permanente, né? Sempre estar conectado, se tem um ensino, mas estar conectado à pesquisa e extensão também, para que a gente não se perca repetindo apenas as palavras do Boal, que a gente vai repetindo, mas a gente vai perdendo o contexto sociocultural. Esse é o grande problema, né? E aí eu acho que nesse sentido, a pergunta da Clara, eu acho que as redes, elas ajudam muito nesse sentido. O Lico Turli, só para dar um exemplo pontual, o Lico Turli fez uma verdadeira revolução na Bahia, né? Claro, a UESB já existia o curso de teatro, mas ele foi para a Universidade Federal da Bahia, né, a convite da Antônia, se eu não me engano. E hoje em dia, o que tem de gente pesquisando o teatro oprimido na UF é um negócio assim absurdo. Durante a pandemia, eles começaram a estudar os livros do Boal, a ler os livros do Boal inteiros no grupo de estudos virtuais. Isso é um outro problema, né? É a praxis, né? E precisa estar o tempo todo nesse equilíbrio, né? A gente precisa também ler, e ler o mundo também, no geral, né? Para acabar não desvirtuando, para não entrar nesse esquema da mercadoria. Espaços como esse aqui que você está propondo, por exemplo, as provocações do Julian Boal são importantíssimas para aprumar melhor o trabalho do teatro oprimido. Então, essa consciência crítica precisa existir e é preciso fomentar isso na universidade, além do teatro oprimido, né? O teatro oprimido é mais uma ferramenta. Então, é mais ou menos por aí.
Obrigada, Hayaldo. Kelly and Pink, would you like to comment?
Do you want to start, Pink?
I do, but I don't necessarily want to answer that question.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I feel like there's I was so inspired by the work that Chetna's doing, Chetna's presentation. Mm-hmm. A lot of the work that I do is also centered around young people, and I just recall early in my study of this work, the strategy of starting the work where it was easiest to start the work. And hearing stories about how in Italy that the work was done, primarily around women's issues, but and because that was what was easy, it was harmless. They're just working with women. They're harmless. They're just working with children. And the fact that oppression is the structures of oppression are so alive and well and generally accepted in spaces with young people in ways that can be brutal. And so creating situations for young people to tell those stories and to present them to the general community is really how one starts to plant the seeds in a household of a critical awareness of how oppression is so present in our everyday lives, and that we teach it from the earliest days of one's humanity. And so just you said something like there was a question about what can local people do, what can people do to support this work? One, to do it, and to do it where it's easy to do it. It's easy to do it in schools. It's easy to do it in neighborhood clubs and rec centers. And those happen to also be the places where I imagine the people who are the targets of oppression historically are. So I would say, to get out into the world where people are facing and struggling against oppression and bring these tools and get them in practice. So that's what I'll say about that. And Kelly, I will defer to you for the further answer.
Thanks so much, Pink. No, just to say briefly about Clara's question about international and local networks, I guess briefly, although it's something I would love to talk about more anytime if you'd like, but briefly, I think that that the local networks that are built around this work, through this work, or that this work intersects with, I think that those are obviously beyond essential, because I think that they are where the concrete material realities of the work are formed and shaped, right? And so I think that it's in those local contexts where I think that the work is grounded. And then what I would say, and then that's really crucial. And then I would say that in terms of international networks, I can only speak for how those networks have shaped my own work and organizing and broader thought, which is that for me, I think that what we envision as possible is obviously profoundly shaped by our specific context and our own environment. And so in many, many moments, the existence of these international networks of thinking around this work have drastically shifted my sense of what is actually concretely, materially possible in my own local contexts, right? And I think also opened up possibilities for people from different parts of the world to be in concrete material relationship with each other, right? To be concretely supporting the work of each other across space. And then about the online conference for PTO, this is a very interesting question, Patrícia. And I think obviously we're going to have a day online this year. I think that it's a question that comes up a lot for PTO. And I suspect that from here on out, it's going to be really important to continue to have online ways of engaging. Historically, the reason that we haven't moved to that is just this sense that I think maybe some of us have been especially thinking about in the context of COVID-19, which is like really so much important and interesting work happened on Zoom and things like that because it was our only option, and it opened up possibilities for people to connect who wouldn't normally connect. And I would say for me, doing Theater of the Oppressed on Zoom is like not my favorite thing, right? To be honest. And so I think that, and Pedagogy of the Oppressed as well. So I think that I imagine going forward, we're going to try to hold both of those things together somehow to make all of that work possible together. And Brazil would be very interesting. Something that I think we've talked a lot about, having conferences outside the US. And in fact, we almost did twice. And interestingly, I say that to be transparent because what it requires is a really long-term set-up relationship with an organization in country, in the place that would be hosting the conference beyond the US, because of certain legal obligations that we have here. And so it was interesting. We ran into things like, local groups in other places understandably saying, wait, so some of our stuff would happen in US currency? No, thank you. Right. And that makes sense. Like, no, thank you. Right. So anyway, these are some of the things that that we're trying to figure out. But I think that long-term partnerships could build to those kinds of conversations in a more concrete way. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen Pink. Chetna?
Yeah, thank you. What you asked Patrícia about Mumbai and its spaces and the parallel analogies at Brazil, I think Mumbai is a very interesting dynamics. We hold Asia's largest slum in Mumbai, which is Dharavi, and just with every slum there is a very high-rise, posh, residential area, and then there is a huge slum shanty area. Then and we have Mumbai is called the commercial capital, the Manchester of India. And there is this Bollywood where all the celebrities stay around here. When you walk on the road, you can see one celebrity actor buying some vegetables, generally. So there is this huge mix, and yet it kind of creates a huge, very visible divide amongst people, right from, of course, we are not even getting to the economies and poverty. There's digital poverty. The multicultural does lead to a lot of boundaries and barriers between people. That's very strange that I have figured out. And there is again the polarity in the systems of learning, which are schools as institutes. As I said, there is this whole IB English school, and then there are these schools who have done many students with no teachers governing. They're not even asked. And however, there's one underlying factor in all these schools, that what Paulo Freire spoke about years ago, it still holds true. The banking model still holds true, because when we do these workshops with teachers, they just say, oh, we don't have time, syllabus is too much, curriculum is a lot, with every school that we go with and every space we go with. Well, I must say the contrast and juxtaposition to that, when we go to a little movement away from Mumbai, like few kilometers away, because there's this the rural belt and the coastal area starts. When we work with those children and teachers, they are so excited about creating education models around Paulo Freire, and they know about this person's name. They can pronounce the name right. They know what is the problem posing, environment, what is the critical consciousness, what is the emergence of intervention realities. They know the names, and they want to buy the book, Paulo Freire's book, and they want to read. And I always have this inside, beside me, and I can show them. So, and the children are so in their bodies, just a little away from Mumbai, I'm saying. And the children here in Mumbai are so shrunken. And when we just recently, I would like to do one work here, demonstrate, when we asked one of the grade 8 child how they're feeling, why are they not moving? We're doing some Boal's exercise. And this girl said, this is how I feel. She said, my body and mind are not connected. And she said, I feel very away from my body and my mind, and I don't like the way this education is happening now. The teacher comes, speaks, and goes away, and more so this online education is so oppressive in their space, because this little girl told us one day when I was in the class and said, speak up. So why are you not speaking? You can unmute. She said, that's the only way I talk in class now. They're muted. So that's probably the state, and I'm still getting very heavy in my stomach when she said I'm muted always, and I was a very expressive girl. This is what I feel now, and so this is a space in Mumbai that we are, and little away from Mumbai, it's a different situation. These children have very less devices, lack of devices, but they will log in every Saturday. You know, these children from the rural Maharashtra, they dress up well for that day, and then we say, Didi, you know, they'll call us Didi. Can we do the TO exercise? They even know those names, you know. So that's where we coexist. I don't know even we coexist, but this, you know, a lot to go, where we create these community spaces where we know where we are. We have to see each other, we like to see each other. I can talk more and more. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chetna. Well, it's 12:15. So I would like to thank you all again. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge and experiences. Agradecer a todos que estiveram conosco e por compartilhar as experiências de trabalho, os conhecimentos acerca da prática de TO e da sua divulgação no ambiente pedagógico, seja ele um ensino básico, seja um ensino universitário. Oh, and I would also like to highlight that I'm going to put the link to the PTO website in the comments below. Se alguém tiver interesse, eu vou colocar o link para o site do PTO nos comentários logo abaixo desse vídeo. Vocês podem acessar, e como a Kelly disse, a chamada para trabalhos na conferência do PTO, que vai acontecer em Chicago, em maio de 2022, elas ainda estão abertas. Eu espero que todos tenham se inspirado nesses trabalhos e espero que tenham gostado da mesa. À noite teremos mais relatos de trabalho com o Teatro do Oprimido e eu vou ter a honra de receber 3 pessoas muito especiais que atuam nesse campo e que fazem trabalhos magníficos utilizando o TO. Muito obrigada e bom dia a todos. Thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, and see ya.